Okay, to talk a little bit more about this, we're joined now by human rights activist Njoki Njehu, who is the Pan-Africa coordinator of the Fight Inequality Alliance. She joins us now from Nairobi, Kenya. Njoki, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. First, let's crunch the figures and look at the highlights of this report. Then we can drill down to the proposals that are being made for a wealth tax. But I'd like to start with this. 3.6 million people have over $5 million in wealth, with a combined wealth of $75.3 trillion US dollars. It sounds absolutely unbelievable.
Yes, thank you and good evening. It is, and when you come to Africa, it is the same kind of shocking figure that we get, that 39 million people have been pushed into extreme wealth, into extreme poverty, rather, in sub-Saharan Africa, while the 5 richest billionaires in Africa over the same time have seen their wealth increase by $9.7 billion. It is obscene, and I think that one of the things that is very clear is that no one, in a just and fair way earns that kind of money. It's not that they are more hardworking than the rest of us, but that there are processes and economic systems that extract wealth and labor and resources from the planet, from workers, and delivers that in the hands of already obscenely wealthy people.
I think a lot of us are interested in, Njoki. It's been a well-known fact that there is inequality in the world. COVID-19 has starkly exposed that at local level, regional level, most importantly, internationally. We've seen that with vaccine inequity. But I'm curious, at a time when millions of people are losing their jobs, families are losing breadwinners, and there actually are no income revenue streams to be explored, how did the world actually have 2,660 billionaires with a combined wealth of 13.76 trillion? Where did this money mushroom from?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, somebody said that, there's a madness to the system, and there's all this language about people being left behind and all of that. But the truth of the matter is that they are pushed behind. There is a system that, again, it's about extracting, it's about exploiting people and the planet. So that whether we are talking about big pharma executives who have, backed by their national governments in the UK, in Canada, in Germany, refused to support a TRIPS waiver so that the COVID-19 vaccine would be available and affordable. And therefore, they continue to make money hand over fist. They continue to really, operate in a system that is about their profit motive, about the bottom line, rather than about the life and death of people in a global pandemic that has already seen 5 million people die. This is how they make it. It's stocks and options and all those kinds of things. It's Jeff Bezos, owning Amazon and the under lockdown, where people couldn't go shopping and where people were worried about contracting the virus. He made a billion after a billion and became the wealthiest man in the world because they were delivering to people. So the pandemic has been conducive for some people being able to make money, while others, really, under lockdown, have starved, some have died, and many continue to suffer.
And I want us to zero in on country experiences in just a moment. But the World Bank says 99% of the world's working class earned less in 2021. This is in the same breath when we as a globe talk about encouraging the entrepreneurial spirit. So some would say, why would you complain if people are using their smarts to pivot their businesses and find opportunities? Where does the imbalance come from? Particularly, as I mentioned at the beginning, that the world's richest, the billionaires, are saying to the financial and political leaders, tax us more.
Yes, they are saying tax us more, but it is not all of them. If you look at, Jeff Bezos is not on that list. Elon Musk is not on that list. Bill Gates is not on that list. And quite a number of people, including the ones who have been named as the richest in South Africa, the richest on the African country, and the richest in many countries. And let's be clear that it is not that they are smarter or that they are more hardworking than the rest of the people in the world. It is that there is a system that is designed to exploit and to extract from labor, from people, from communities, from the planet. And if it were a fair system and it was about hard work, when you look and you listen to how much hard work that African citizens do, then we would be, as African women, be the richest people in the world. It is not about hard work, it is not about smarts, but it is a system rigged to benefit a few.
I mean, you mentioned Elon Musk, and one remembers that famous tweet discussion around him donating his wealth and how much it could help the world's downtrodden. And he said it all comes down to accountability. When you talk about wealth tax, you should be looking at equitable tax systems that promote growth. I want to look at South Africa, particularly considering the fact that there was unrest in July in this country. You can take the politics into it or out of it, but a lot of people said it drills down to that these were hunger riots. Look at the amount of money that were gained by the billionaires here in South Africa, and the number of people who lost their jobs and livelihoods. Talk us through that, and then also move to Kenya, where you are.
So, I think this is the thing. When we talk about inequality, there is consensus. Whether you're talking about the IMF, the World Bank, you're talking about the Pope, even when you talk about the CIA talks about how inequality puts security at risk, and that I think is part of what we saw in the riots in South Africa. That people had enough, and when you have a situation where the government is not responsive, and when you have a situation where people are having to choose between two very hard choices, whether you go out and work and try to make a living, try to make a livelihood, have a livelihood for you and your family, or die, be exposed and die from the COVID-19 virus or from the pandemic. These are very hard choices that no one should have to make. No parent, no human being should have to make those choices. And when we want to talk about accountability, can please take a seat, Elon Musk, and don't try to preach to people about accountability, because there is no accountability. These are people who are so rich that they are trying to figure out what to do with money, so they are going out into outer space. If they want to talk about accountability, let them look at the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of proposals that exist about how to fight inequality. This is not a mystery. We know from the examples of the Scandinavian countries, we know from the examples, you've mentioned Argentina, it's been mentioned about Argentina and Colombia doing a wealth tax. We know what governments responded. If you go as far back as the end of the Second World War, into a situation of crisis, and government responded by implementing social programs that were about uplifting everybody and making sure that the extremes of poverty and of suffering did not exist, and that people were supported. We continue to see, let's talk about accountability. What about governments that are actually engaged in, until the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, the only bailouts in times of economic crisis that we had seen, significant bailouts in recent years, have been to corporations. Whether you're talking about 2008, when there was the global financial crisis, most of the bailouts went to corporations. So what have we learned in the last 2 years? That governments know what they need to do. We saw basic income grants, cash transfers being done, all over the world, including in the US, where for many years the slur of the welfare queen was the response to questions about income and livelihood. So we know what needs to happen. And in Kenya, we saw not just income grants, we saw government going into informal settlements and bringing water tankers so that people could have clean water. So the governments know what they need to do, but the priorities are not there. And this is why for Fight Inequality Alliance, around the world in about 30 countries, we are mobilizing.
And this is what I want to ask you about, Njoki, because you're saying if you tax the world's wealthiest 0.1%, it would raise a sustainable amount. This would help, or this should actually be plowed back into the fiscus of countries, and this should go towards redistribution, targeting the poorest of the poor. But corruption has prevented many countries from doing so. It may be written in policy. It doesn't exactly work out like that. Your report looks at countries like Mexico, for instance, and India. So is there going to be consensus, a global alignment on the tax regulations that would allow for this? Because this has been an ongoing conversation for years.
There are two things that I want to say. One of which is that when the illicit financial flows report that was headed by former South African President Thabo Mbeki looked at where money is bleeding out of the continent, corruption, as it's often talked about, was a very small percentage. Most of it happens in corporate giveaways, where corporations come, they extract in the DRC, in South Africa. Look at how many of the billionaires in South Africa have their wealth going back to apartheid era from mining interest and the mining industry. That this is where most of the money is, where most of the corruption is happening, where they get the money out, they get the minerals, they get the oil out, but they don't actually pay taxes. They get tax holidays, they get concessions. So when we look at corruption, even as much as there's a lot of talk, and in Kenya, this is the narrative about corruption, and it does exist. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but I'm saying that this is not the bulk.
And Njoki,
it's kind of
one of the things that report spoke about was looking at very clearly the normative understanding of the corruptor and the corruptee. State capture was something that featured highly in that report. And I want to look at that because we are saying that if we look at wealth tax, it'll ensure that we invest in a system, in a public investment health and social protection system for the greater global good. COVID-19 has been a typical example of how the world at large has failed to come together to do that. It has exposed the fissures between North and South, how the rich, as you say, get poorer and hoard.
Yes. So I think that for many people, for many activists, for the Fight Inequality Alliance, one of the things that we are looking at is how government sets priorities. What are the things that money is being spent on? And as I said, there is a system and an intention to the madness where some people are getting poorer and some people are getting richer. So, in country after country, citizens are really tracking where money goes. They are tracking how budget priorities are set. So instead of there is money. I mean, that one of the things that we need to also understand is that there is not a scarcity of money. And the pandemic was a clear indicator of this, that there were all kinds of resources made available in country after country to cover all kinds of things. There were policies that were put in place temporarily that we insist should become permanent. So budget processes, citizens following budget processes at national, at county or provincial level, to make sure that instead of the money that is available being spent on more raising salaries, bigger cars, more equipment, that it is spent on providing universal health care, on education, and all these other things that we are talking about. So there is the need to get more money to do what needs to be done. And at the same time for citizens, and this is what they're organizing, that Fight Inequality Alliance, monitoring by other kinds of organizations like Oxfam and the Institute for Policy Studies and others that have come together to do this research, is about saying, this is how much you're spending on health or on education versus how much you're spending out of State House, or how much you're spending in salaries for MPs, et cetera, et cetera. So it is about all of those things. There is not a single silver bullet that will cure all of this. It is fighting corruption. It is setting the right priorities. It is citizens tracking and demanding accountability from their elected leaders and from duty bearers.
Thank you so much for your time, Njoki Njehu, human rights activist. Just to go back to what these organizations are saying, to put it into perspective, they are saying an annual tax of the world's richest people will be enough to lift 2.3 billion people out of poverty, make enough vaccines for the whole world, and deliver universal health care and social protection for all the citizens of low and low middle income countries. That's 3.6 billion people in a total.